build my gallows and build them high. Makes a long time climbing before I die. I want the chance.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Longbangers. I'm May.
I'm John.
How's it going, John?
Very well. How are you?
I'm good. Just we've done this in the sort of reverse order this morning. We had recorded Longbangers, and we're going out for folk for talking points. Got to the end of Longbangers, had not covered a single talking point because we rambled on about everything and anything.
A variety of topics.
Yes. Was it smorgasbord?
Smorgasbord.
Yeah.
Is that a Swedish word or is it just a weirdly English?
I think it's Swedish. It sounds Swedish. If it's not, it should be.
It sounds like a wee side table you get at IKEA.
Yes. Or like a euphemism for like a small person or something like that.
We're in very real danger of going off on tangents again.
Already. Already, right. So if you're a subscriber, and you should be a subscriber, there's a very good, but I would say not particularly well structured episode waiting for you on Wednesday morning when it drops. I think you'll like it. We enjoyed recording it. It is what it is. Right, we'll say that.
And that's the most important thing. Like, it's all about us.
Well, it is. We, you know, this is like a wanky thing. Like, you should never ever give an insight into my mind, right? We sometimes change our wee Twitter bio to sort of reflect what the podcast is, right? And obviously, we split out short bangers and heat bangers from long bangers, right? So that people who only wanted to listen to Hibs stuff could only listen to Hibs stuff. Somebody wanted to listen to nothing about Hibs. I was got something different to listen to. And we were like the 6th or 7th best podcast. I think we had that for a wee while. And now there's not 6 or 7 podcasts on the way. So I think we're third best now, right? So I think the folk who have stayed the course are down the slope, the Ramble, and us. Right? Third best. Right, fair enough. I'll take that. Right, we're third best.
It's on the podium. That's still an achievement.
It's a medal, and not just a medal for turning up. Right?
Correct.
So we'll take that. I forgot to start the clock on this again, John. Just going to do that. They're just digressing. Anyway, we changed it recently, right? And there was a thing. Right. Can when you accidentally watch stuff on LinkedIn instead of like the good stuff that's on Twitter. But, you can watch Twitter, and there's loads of shite there that just it's fucking nonsense, but it's quite amusing. And accidentally, sometimes if you watch a video or two on LinkedIn, and it's like serious stuff. There's a guy, Simon Sinek, right? You're bound to have seen him, right? He's like well known for talking about sort of leadership and business culture and how you treat people, etc. Right? Very, very good guy. Very interesting. But he has this whole thing about start with why. Like, why do you do what you do? Right? And like if the idea being if you're a business, right, and you want to get your staff on board, you tell them why you're doing what you're doing, right? Pretty much bullshit, right? On this one, right? I think it all will work, and it does work. He's obviously done studies and stuff like that on it. We're fucking off on a tangent again, right? Sorry about this. But most of the time, if you were going to like in Britain, right, because of the sort of the national psyche that we have, if somebody was like if your chief executive was to say, we're here to make people's pensions better, right, you'd go, oh, all right, that sounds like a reasonable thing to do, quite a nice thing to look at. But you're here to make money for your shareholders because that's what your actions do, right? The stuff that you pretend and say. So because we're so cynical in Britain, that why thing I think just doesn't fucking work as well as it might do in other countries. That's just my opinion, right? Because I think most of us sort of go, I don't believe that. You just want to fucking, you just want to make money and you'll shaft us to make that money. So I didn't believe that you're just interested in giving folk a better retirement. I think that's something that makes what you do seem palatable to everybody else.
So anyway, can you remind me why you're telling me this?
Yes. So I was thinking, but why do we do the podcast? Like, what's our why? Right? It's kind of where I went with it, and how would I describe it to other folk? Because like we had Not the Average Hibs podcast, and I thought that was a wee bit disrespectful to the other Hibs podcasts as well, because none of them are average Hibs podcasts. So we try to make a podcast we'd want to listen to, and that's how I do it. Like I would want to listen to what we do. I didn't listen. I didn't like the sound of my voice. Like, not that you would tell for the amount of fucking talk, but that's how they got the Twitter bio. We make the podcast that we want to listen to, and so we are unapologetic, and we should be unapologetic that sometimes we go off on wee fucking waffles. That's where I was going with it, John. To bring it back round. I'm glad you asked the question. Where was I going with it? Because I had forgotten. Right, before we go way off on more tangents, right? The reason we're doing this as Longbangers and not as extra time, which was the original plan, is that we're going to cover folks' talking points that they sent in. Half an hour goes much quicker when you're recording than you think. You think you've got loads of time to talk about stuff, and then before you know it, you're like, oh, I could help with no touched any of it. So, starting from the top, Nick Heller asked, who were all the people wandering around behind Lee Johnson in his Marbella recap interview?
I must admit, I don't know because I haven't seen it. However, I'm going to speculate that it was a travelling circus.
That's not what I was expecting to hear there. I think there was like a variety of like non-playing staff kicking about. Hibs tracksuits. I didn't recognise many of them, if I'm honest. Although I wasn't really paying attention.
Was it Hibs associated people? So you saw like the badge or the tracksuit kicking about?
I'm going to say yes, John. But I'll caveat that with I was listening more than watching.
Right.
So
I wonder if there's probably more backroom staff than we're aware of. And what I mean by that is that beyond, say, the manager or the assistant, David Gray.
Did you say Beyonce?
No, I think I said beyond.
Beyonce.
Beyonce was there. I think Taylor Swift was maybe doing the halftime entertainment.
They fucking can't stay away from the backroom stuff, by the way. Like
it's the place to be.
Sports science. Yeah.
Yep. Calvin Charlie and he would have been there. And there's a guy that I've started, or I say started, I started referring to him a wee while ago as Faux Newell, because I thought he looked a wee bit like Joe Newell, but he clearly wasn't. I don't actually know who he is, but he's obviously got a role at Easter Road. So I would imagine that the backroom staff there's probably more people there than certainly I'm aware of, because I'm pretty ignorant of it, and I suspect that's who it would have been.
Aye, Faux Newell, by the way, is that's a great line.
Honestly, you'll see the guy, you'll know who I mean. If you can't think of him already.
I think I know who you mean. And again, I also don't know his name. I like that Faux Newell. Very clever, John. You can add that to your Twitter bio as well. Yeah. Just put very clever.
Very clever. Likes a pun. Occasional contributor to the podcast.
Jeff Ashton said also, hold on, so I think Jeff's made 2 points here if he's got an also right. Having watched Levitt's video scoring goals for fun, does the fact he appears to be playing as a 6 in front of the defence make sense? John, what would you say about that kind of question? Not a question, but the answer to that question.
Sorry, what?
Yeah. I realise I phrased the question to you as if I was asking you to pass comment on the standard of Jeff's question rather than just answering the question, which is what I was kind of wanting you to do.
I find Jeff's questions always well thought out and considered. Goals, number 6. I remember. So actually, there was an interview I remember reading about Eddie Turnbull. It was a good few years ago now, and I think it was maybe towards the end of Eddie Turnbull's life, and I think it was in the Evening News, and it was talking about him. I think he'd maybe been out at school, and he was asking a young laddie what position he was playing. He said, "I'm a holding midfielder," and he said, "What is it you're holding?" Which I think is one of those very clever sort of mature person ways of saying, what are you talking about? Like, it sounds like you're overcomplicating things. And I think we talked about this in the subscriber episode where like heat maps and players and positions and where you think they're going to play. If you can, so I think of sometimes like the holding midfielder is just a guy that does the dirty work, the sort of left to right, maybe doesn't go beyond the halfway line. So you might think of someone like Marvin Bartley, for example. So I think he was that good kind of holding midfielder or the enforcer or the guy that breaks up, disrupts play or whatever. But if you can get that player who has a little bit more about him, who has the football intelligence to look at positions where he can fit in, like a box-to-box midfielder, for example, or someone who does all of that, does that really well, but he can also score goals. It's a great thing to have.
Yeah, it is, and I agree. That's a good point, well made.
Thanks. This Twitter bio needs to get bigger. Elon Musk, if you're listening.
Do you know what? I shared this with you, not blow smoke. We had Tom Wallace asked us to get you on a 5-year contract. I think he just wants you tied down and back on.
I think at this stage of my career, I'm looking for 10.
Fucking hell. I said you're on a rolling contract, casual basis. Jeff also said, also impressed with the young lads. Megwa ahead of the others in terms of age and probably getting a first team start this season. But Reuben and Malotnikov looked really promising.
I'll have to be honest, I didn't see much of the player specifically. I did have the game on. I was watching it, but with it being 3 halves and some other things going on, I wasn't able to pay too much attention to their performances. However, those guys have been on the fringes now and have been getting talked about for a while, so it's good to see them getting game time in pre-season friendlies. I'd like to think that those pre-season friendlies aren't just a case of, well, we'll get them on holiday with us and we'll get them a wee bit game time, and that'll be them. I'd like to see that carry on into the season proper.
Yeah,
because I think we've got Cadden's out fairly long term, and you've got Lewis Miller there as right back. You're going to need some sort of backup in competition for him, so that's Megwa. I forget where Malotnikov plays, but he's going to provide competition for someone. And young laddie McAllister, I think because we've heard a lot about him, and I think we said in the subscriber episode that his signing was kind of used as a stick to beat Lee Johnson with. It'd be good to see him get some game time as well, even if it's towards the end of games. Like, you're needing these guys. It's hard to get these guys first team games ahead of the established senior players, but they also don't improve unless they get that game time as well, and that's a challenge for the manager and the coaching staff to get them in. But we do need to see them play.
Johnson talks about that in his in an interview that we referenced before about the pathway for the young players and being able to get them in, and how he thought that they would impact the team, which is great on the face of it. But he told us that in January when they were explaining why we weren't making loads of signings. And it's one of those ones that I think the proof will be in the pudding. Proof's in the eating, isn't it? That's the phrase. Is it?
Aye. When they say the proof is in the pudding, do they mean that you have to eat it to find out?
Yeah.
Because then that goes back to what you're saying, it's eating.
I wonder what the origins of that one are. Is it to do with, the old puddings where they used to put fucking toys and things in that in?
Oh, sixpences and that.
Aye. That's a fucking weird thing to do, eh?
Aye. You wouldn't, I'm pretty sure there's probably multiple examples in Victorian times of people, or even more recently, of people dying because they choked to death in some currency.
Aye, or just off the bacteria off it. Do you know, imagine putting coins are fucking filthy. I'm going to put a coin in your food.
It's not even you'd be, because these things, I think it was traditionally trifles and that you would put it in. Oh no, wait, sorry, it was like a Christmas pudding you would put the sixpence in. So maybe if there was a bit of bacon going on there.
Aye.
Unless you were just growing cultures in your coins and you just had aye.
Right, tell you a wee story along these lines, just because. Right. So my grandma, right, on my mum's side, she's no longer with us. She was about the height of Yoda, right? Really small woman, completely blind, right? She stayed out wee bungalow in Livingston. She'd come over to us at Christmas, and so we were sitting Christmas dinner, and she would have to sort of feel around almost with her knife and fork for where the food is, right? Because she couldn't see that she could eat herself without help. not eat herself. That's
Yeah.
impossible, right?
You'd have picked up on that if I'd said it, but I'll just let you run with it.
Yeah. I just thought that's how my head works. I was like, I better fuck it. I had to correct it myself. So do you know, like, folk are pulling crackers at the Christmas dinner, right? So you've got cracker going, and as I don't know, it's like my sister and my mum or whatever, right? I've pulled a cracker. A wee whistle has come flying out, landed on my grandma's plate, just as she's sort of preparing a forkful. So she scoops up, whistle with her food, goes to eat it, obviously starts choking, right? On it, but choking with a wee. She like needed like the sort of the Heimlich maneuver, sort of kind of big pat on the back to get it moved. But it was in that sort of, you have that moment of shit. This is serious, but also this is quite hilarious as well, because the sound effects normally like somebody choking doesn't get accompanied with a
It could have sounded like the full-time whistle if you gave it like 2 or 3 heaves to get it out.
Bless her. Right. Fuck knows where we're going there. Proof in the pudding. Right.
Yes.
So, whether or not Lee Johnson sticks to that, right, but I hope he does, and I hope to see these boys come through. But they have to be good enough. This is the other thing. I think this is one of the things as a support we can be guilty of, is that we see a little bit of young players and assume that they're going to be ready, and we push to get them in the team, and a lot of the time they're not really there. And I think you've got that balance between throw them in and see how, like that sink or swim, which happened with the Golden Generation. Like, I remember speaking to James McDonough, did an interview with him when he was under 19s coach, and he was saying, like, your Browns, Riordans, O'Connor, they weren't banging the manager's door down demanding to be played, or the performances weren't putting them in that space. They got played out of necessity because we could afford to play them. But they all were good enough that they took that opportunity and rose to it. So they developed quickly into really good players. There is an argument that you could do that, but I don't think nowadays players get the time to go and have like a half a season of being shite. Really, like being off the pace. Without folk, and we talked about it in the last episode, folk make the judgment earlier on they're not good enough. You saw it with Josh Campbell. Like Josh Campbell, with his like first proper season in our first team, got slaughtered, absolutely slaughtered. Ken, like, he's not good enough for the club, get him out. He's never a footballer in a million years. All these things, and then actually the next season he goes on and has like a cracking season. These players, if they come in and they're not quite ready, like if we put Josh O'Connor in for 10 games and he doesn't score, and he doesn't look like scoring, he gets written off. Melkerson got written off. Tavares got a game, really, a couple of games, and written off.
Yep.
I think it's difficult. I think players have to be. We have to improve the team when they come in, almost, to get away with it now.
It might. So I think some of the players that you've described in the circumstances that they come to play in Hibs first team. So I'm trying to think. Did Josh Campbell come in? Was it after the? Sorry, there was. Christ, we went through that many managers that quickly. So he did get game time under Sean Maloney, didn't he?
Yeah,
and who was the manager before
that? Jack Ross was in charge before Maloney.
Was Jack Ross immediately before Sean Maloney? Sean Maloney, then we got Lee Johnson in. Was it that the sort of?
Apart from there was a wee interim where Sir David Gray took over. Do you know, like, for the cup final in that? Jack Ross was sacked just before the cup final. Sir David took us over that period, and Maloney joined straight after the cup final.
I wonder if overriding some of these things is what you were saying there about like the amount of time that players are given. But I think the amount of time that they are given can also be relative to the success of the team at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So when Josh Campbell came in, originally Hibs weren't doing particularly well. Jack Ross was on his way out. Sean Maloney had his little, I don't know if you would even call his time at Hibs a honeymoon period before he was away. It was a challenging period for the club. So everything that was going on was being focused on, and if there was a poor performance, you're shit, you're not good enough. Whereas if Josh Campbell was to come into a more or even a better Hibs side, or any player, any young player that was coming in, they might get more of a crack of the whip, more time from the support. So I think the better you're doing, probably the more time you get. The poorer you're doing, the less time you get.
Yeah, and I think also the expectations on managers now prohibits the youth players because you can't. And again, you go back to Mowbray, and Mowbray was exceptional in many ways, right? But he had like because of the way that he played football, he got away with us losing games. Do you know, like because we played well and because he was a young team, and it was almost because it was like, well, we've no money and we've got this young team. Everybody sort of got on board with that. Now we've got a bit of money. Hearts, Aberdeen have got a bit of money. If we don't keep up with them, we'll fall further and further behind. We don't have the luxury of having can have a season of young players. Lee Johnson will only get like if Johnson started the season playing McAllister, Malotnikov, and Megwa, and we won the top 6, top 4, even come Christmas time, he'd be sacked. Like managers can't afford to do it now.
But the reverse of that, I think, is also true. That if a Hibs manager wasn't doing so well and needed to change something, he probably wouldn't go for the younger players that are looking to play because he wants to rely on like the senior professionals to get him out of the rut that he's in, which is a complete contradiction. You need to like change. If what does they say? Like continue to do the same thing and expecting a different result. That's your definition of insanity. But like football managers across the world do that. They don't change things, and they inevitably get sacked. And I think it might even be because like the whole football model is broken, that managers can be rewarded for failure. They'll get paid off, and then they'll go and get a job somewhere else.
Jim Goodman.
Well, I think, did we have a question about that?
I hope so. I hope so. Right. I think it's a really interesting point. Like the whole young things. I totally advocate playing them. By the way, like, and I think if you can create an environment where you can get 1 or 2 youth players, I think give them that time to develop and grow into that almost grow into the shirt. I think we talked about it with maybe Josh Campbell. Can't remember. There was that player that we talked about that got better and, like we said, grew into the shirt and improved as they went. Maybe Josh Campbell. I think there should be almost be mandated to the manager to say you need to bring a couple of players through, but it's up to the club to produce players good enough to go into our first team. Right, the John Armstrong said, what signings do we need? What youth players are good enough and who needs to go? Right, so I think we've probably covered youth players there. What signings do we need, John? Where do you think we've still got gaps?
I think we still have gaps in defence. I think we're maybe covered on the left and right of defence with, I think the other was the young laddie McIntyre might play understudy to Lewis Stevenson. I think in the middle we've got Hanlon and Rocky.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this seems to be the conversation that we have every season. Is Fish coming in?
Well, according to the reports, Fish is agreed, the Man United have agreed to loan for the season.
Is he scarf above the head official yet?
We've not seen scarf above the head, but it was reported as Man United have got their friendly at Murrayfield. He'll come take part in that. And
then, going to bring him up the road for that and just leave him? Yeah.
Pretty much. It's that. We've got you a one-way ticket. Well,
you're on the coach, one up.
Aye, that's it. So he'll do that, and then he'll kick about in Edinburgh and join up with the team then, which is when I think we'll get the scarf above the head. But by all accounts, that deal is done. So we'll have Fish, Hanlon, and Rocky as the centre halves. But I think we probably still need another one in there.
Another one defender.
Another one, centre half. I think the right side you've got Miller and Megwa. That's Megwa's opportunity to be like understudy at first team level. Miller should, I think, have that right back spot as his.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. There's nothing that sticks out in my mind. I think we signed a wide player in Obita. We've got definitely got cover at goalkeeper. I'm assuming that Marshall's going to be number 1. You've got Wallacott and Boric come in. I think we might need perhaps another striker.
Yeah,
I know that we've got Boyle, Yuan, and Lefondre there, but I think that 3 probably relies on, assuming that we want to play 3 up front.
Melkerson as
probably.
well.
Oh, Melkerson as well. Sorry, I think because Melkerson had been away on loan. Was it Sparta Rotterdam? Rotterdam.
Yeah, I think so.
I think there's a real opportunity here for him, especially, and it might go back to something like when we had Grant Holt, who really helped Cummings with his goals and kind of like his education, if you like, as a footballer, to have that more senior head there. I'm hoping that Le Fondre will be that senior head that Melkerson can learn from and even kind of rotate with while he kind of builds on his experience and comes in. And I think probably it's a bit of a cliche and I'm almost reluctant to use it, but a couple of goals for Melkerson, like say if he was to come on and replace Le Fondre with, say, half an hour ago, he comes in, gets a few goals, and then he's pushing for that first team place, which competition for places is a good thing for the club.
Yeah, I'd love to see Melkerson do well. Like I think because of the fanfare of his signing last January.
I can't. It's been challenging for him since he came in, but I find it difficult to accept that the player that scored 2 goals against Motherwell isn't still there. Like that wasn't a fluke. That wasn't a blip. The vision to make the run, the control, especially for the second one. In fact, even the instinct for the first goal when he made that little dart just in front of the 6-yard line to get the header from Jasper's cross. All those things are instinctive to him, and if we can foster that confidence through a little bit of experience with someone like Le Fondre, again, I think that's got to be a real bonus for Hibs.
Yeah. I totally agree. I'd love to see him do well. I think this is a big season for him at Hibs. You want to see him go and really stake a claim for that first team shirt. Right, who needs to go was John's other question. So we've seen McGuinness leave. Runa Hauge just got a move back to Norway, I think. Are there still players on the periphery of the first team that you think could be moved on?
I think I don't know if you'd call it an elephant in the room, but the big question mark is probably over Tavares.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think he travelled to Marbella, and that would kind of suggest that if you're not part of the pre-season training camp, I think as a player you're going to be going well, unless there's an injury there that we're not aware of.
No, he's been playing development games.
Development games. You got to think, like, if I was signed and I had a shot at the first team and I didn't make it, am I going to be getting in the first team? Do I want to be looking elsewhere? It might be that his style of football just isn't suited to Scotland. Like, I do think that he has ability, but I think we're also aware that the pace of Scottish football doesn't always allow people time on the ball, and I think it's a very physical game here as well. And I'm not saying that he's not up to the demands of like the physicality of Scottish football, but I do wonder if he's got a better career elsewhere.
I think that's probably a fair way to look at it, John. And definitely, you saw with, with Dylan Tate and Dan Mackay last season, who never went to Spain. I remember us commenting on it. Dylan Tate, I don't think has a future at Hibs, but
he's Hamilton now.
If I was to read between the lines, so I think when his loan finishes, I think he's got a year left at Hibs. I think, again, sort of read between the lines, I don't think Tate's been happy with Hibs. I don't think Hibs are especially happy with him. Hence moving him on. So I think his time at Hibs will peter out. He might move in the summer permanently somewhere if we can do that, like as in next summer once his loan's up. Or he might really shine at Hamilton and come and stake a claim for the first team, right? And I suppose we would all like that to happen. Dan Mackay, I think, took his year at Inverness, worked hard, and I think he will be like a squad player this season. I think he will be cover, and I think Hibs will use him, so I think we'll keep him. The player that I think that stands out is one that will move on is probably Deutsch, potentially Henderson as well.
Do you know what? I'd forgotten about those players because obviously they've kind of been on the periphery or they've been away on loan. It doesn't look like Deutsch. Did he? I don't know if he travelled to Marbella.
He played quite well as well. Got got a goal in the first game. I think it's Europa.
Oh, of course. But I think with him, I mean, he went on loan having had a really bad spell with injury and a loss in form, and it was probably a good thing for him. But I think he got something like 3 goals and 28 appearances or something. So I don't think that loan spell was the kind of kickstart to his, trying to come back to Hibs and getting his career back on track. So it might be again like that he needs to move on to try and get the most out of the remaining years of his football career, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be Easter Road. Henderson's I think it's a tricky situation, because there's been times where he's influenced games.
Yeah.
So there was a game, for example, where we needed the points and he was the one that got the goal against St Mirren. And I think there was the game against Arbroath, for example, where he came in and he set up Kevin Nisbet for a goal. And I know, so they're just some examples, but there's also probably, I think, more examples where the games kind of passed them by. So I think in the derby, for example, he came on and I think he had 2 or 3 contributions, and I think 2 of those 3 contributions were to play a long ball straight out the park.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be that he decides that his future lies elsewhere. Because I think there's other players. So you mentioned there Daniel Mackay coming in. And I think when he came in, there was a real bit of promise showed in the European game. And then I don't know what the decision was. I don't know if it was like a change of managers or whatever it happened to be. But he went on loan to Inverness. And I think one of the last things he did last season was score against Celtic in the Scottish Cup final. And I think the player that he is and the player that I saw before, and I haven't looked at his time at Inverness since, I remember him being a wide player, having pace, and also being quite direct as well. And I don't necessarily see him as being a squad player. I definitely see him as being someone that challenges maybe Martin Boyle for game time, or even Jordan Abita.
Yeah.
And I think there's a possibility of him even challenging someone like Yuan up front, or partnering Lefondre, for example.
Interesting. I hope he does. He's a player I like. So I try to pay attention to him when, like the BBC Alba or whatever are showing lower league games. I always thought he did all right. So as a player there, definitely, it's just a big season for him. Right, we're getting out of time, so we'll just rattle through the last few. Right, Jamie Brodie, will the club be making any signings this week? I don't know. Fish is the one that we expect to happen.
It'd be good to see him back.
Yeah, and hopefully we get a striker in this season. Chris Bell asked, is the youth players actually going to break through this year? I think we've spoken a bit about the youth players, and hopefully we see that happen. Ian Murray, McAllister cameo better than Levitt so far. It's interesting when you bring in a player, and you kind of hope the players that you bring in are better than what you've got at the club already. This is like the challenge for McAllister is to go and take Levitt's place over the long term. I think probably too early. 1 pre-season game or 2 pre-season games is probably not and again, to quote another podcast, not a big enough sample size for it. Thank you, Liam. Finn asked, what would be a success for next season?
Finishing higher than 5th. I think I've said on the podcast before that regardless of how your season finishes, what you're looking to do is take what you had the year before, strengthen and try and improve upon it. So so last year, we never finished as high as we would have liked, but you've got to be looking at, we won a kick in the arse off 4th. I think if we'd beaten Hearts, we maybe could have taken it into the last. In fact, was Hearts the last game?
Hearts was the last game, yeah.
If we had beaten them, we could have overtaken Hearts for 4th.
Yeah, we would have overtaken Hearts, yeah.
Yeah. So we won a kick in the arse off last year, and when you think back to last year over the course of the piece, there was some really challenging times. There was a lot of calls for the manager's head, so to be a kick in the arse off 4th maybe wasn't that bad, but you're definitely looking to improve upon that this year. Yeah. And let's say Scottish Cup. Or the League Cup. Trophy would be good.
I think we need cup runs, at least to get to Hampden. Right, and again, there's a school of thought that says unless you win the cup, you can't consider it a success, right? But I just think it's not, for me, it's no black and white. I think a successful run in the cup takes you to semi-final, final.
What was our record in the? Because we got knocked out in the group stages
Yeah,
last year.
first time asking in both cups last season.
So, I'm going to stick to my guns and say improve upon your position last year.
Yeah.
Do better. You've got to view it as relatively successful.
The relative is the word there here. Relative success. So success is winning it. Relative success is can you get to a final or a semi-final. Fourth place, unbeaten in the derbies. I think that should be something that we're looking.
Winning at Tynecastle would be good.
Yeah, beating them at Easter Road. Do you know, like just fucking sure. Make that your starting point. Beat them. That normally means the call makes this point. I think it's valid. Normally, if you've got a good derby record, you do well in the league anyway. So start there, right, and then see what happens. Steve asked, "Is Porteous the victor in the protracted Goodwin versus Porto war?" Yes.
You have to say yes.
Henry said, "Is Noah Kenna going to break through at Hibs this season?" Sorry, my dog's barking. Apologies if you can hear that in the background.
Remind me of the question again. Is
Noah Kenna going to break through at Hibs this season?
He's got competition there potentially ahead of him in Levitt. I think based on what we were describing about Levitt before, Kenna might need to up his game a little bit and start adding a little bit more. I think originally he looked a wee bit. I'm going to say pedestrian, but I think what I mean by that is that the game was a little bit quicker than he expected. So I'm thinking back to, for example, the goal that Hibs gave away against Livingston, where he kind of like stroked the ball over to Chabraya, never made it. Livingston capitalised on it.
Yeah,
you're going to need to be quick. You're going to need to be hard. You're going to need to be on it if you're going to make it.
I agree. Kenna's a player I would love to see do it. I just think he's. I've spoken about when we signed him. I like that type of player. You know, like your spoiler, like your Marvin Bartley or your Jorge Claros or Mark Milligan. Like these players, I just like them. I like players who have that role in the team. Kenna looked very good at the sort of interceptions, winning the ball back. Maybe not quite as good at it going forward or kind of what he does with the ball after he's got it. But I think there's a player there. And again, maybe he was overhyped and maybe I just fell for the hype. But I would like to see him do it. I don't think he will. I think he will probably fall into the players who will be moved on category.
I'd like to see an example, and you can maybe correct me here if I'm forgetting any. I'd like to see an example of a player like Kenna, a player like Tavares, who come in, who maybe need a bit of time to adjust to Scottish football, out with the pressure of, say, Easter Road. Who go away to another club to kind of get a bit of time and experience there where maybe the expectations aren't quite so high, so that they can acclimatise themselves, if you like, to Scottish football, to then come back and then go on and become the player that we wanted them to be.
Yeah.
I don't remember having seen it yet. I think we've seen some players that have been brought in like sort of development style. So I think you mentioned Dylan Tate, talked about Daniel Mackay. There's Kenna. Tavares has obviously been, I don't know if you'd call his farming out to the development squad alone, but you like to see the time where they come back and just improving it. I don't think it's quite happened yet.
No. Right, the last one we've got is Ray Forsyth, and I think Ray, what we'll do is we'll cover this because it needs a bit more discussion than we've got time for just now. So we'll cover it probably in the next episode. Widening gap in finances between Scotland and pretty much any other country. And he says, I'm sure I've seen something saying Scottish football has more people per population in the stadium than any other country. That has to count for something. And also, is it because Old Firm are hoovering up all the domestic finances, or is it because Scottish football was poorly run? I think that's almost an episode in itself. But probably both of those things are factors in the fact that when all the sort of the distribution of wealth was arranged, it was geared towards heavily rewarding positions 1 and 2, which are the same two clubs invariably in Scotland. So the gap gets wider and wider every single season. This is like I've talked about this before, why it's not fair to sort of say, well, Lennon's team beat Celtic, because the gap between Hibs and Celtic is bigger now than it ever was.
Yeah.
It's bigger now than it was last season. much bigger than it was the season before, and much bigger than it was the season before that, and it's going to be much bigger again next season as well. I mean, Celtic just sold Jota for 25 million.
Yep.
Do you know, we just you can't compete with that. Anyway, so it's a great question, and we'll give it its dues at a later date. Right, thanks for your time this morning, John. Thanks for tuning in, folks, and for your great talking points. We'll be back with an episode with Amy Canavan next week, and we'll probably have some other Hibs content as well, so watch out for that. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Well, they trailed me down when I broke free. I drank all the whiskey in Tennessee. I don't drink water, no.